Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Harmony's edge and watched the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. The structure was unlike anything Earth had ever built. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, with gleaming metal towers and curved domes that caught the light from nearby stars. Ships from hundreds of different worlds docked at its many ports. Some looked like giant insects, others like flowing water made solid, and some had shapes that hurt her eyes to look at directly. "Captain, we're receiving the welcoming signal," said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen from her position at the communication station. "They're directing us to Docking Bay 77 Alpha." Elena nodded and smoothed down her dress uniform. Today was the day humanity would officially join the Galactic Council. After 2 years of careful negotiations and cultural exchanges, Earth had finally been invited to become the 848th member species of galactic civilization. The honor felt overwhelming. "Take us in slowly, Marcus," Elena told her pilot. "I want this to be perfect." The docking process took nearly an hour. The station's automated systems had to scan their ship 3 times and run compatibility checks on everything from their air mixture to their gravity generators. Elena spent the time reviewing her prepared speech one more time, though she had already memorized every word. When they finally stepped onto the station, Elena was amazed by what she saw. The main corridor was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows high above. Beings from across the galaxy walked, floated, and slithered past them in every direction. She saw creatures that looked like walking trees, others that appeared to be made of crystal, and some that seemed to shift between different forms as they moved. Their guide was a tall, thin being called Ambassador Xerixtal. His species, the Zeridians, looked somewhat like humans but with blue-gray skin and eyes that were completely black. He wore flowing robes that changed color as he walked. "Welcome, humans of Earth," Xerixtal said in perfect English, though his voice had a strange musical quality to it. "This is indeed a historic day. Your species has shown remarkable progress in such a short time." Elena smiled and bowed slightly, the way the diplomatic protocols had taught her. "Thank you, Ambassador. We are honored to join the galactic community." They walked through the station for what felt like hours. Xerixtal showed them the great library where the knowledge of 847 civilizations was stored. He took them past the trading halls where merchants from different worlds exchanged goods that Earth had never dreamed of. They saw gardens where plants from 1,000 different planets grew together under artificial suns. Finally, they reached the council chamber itself. It was a vast, spherical room with floating platforms arranged in circles that rose from the floor to the curved ceiling. Each platform held representatives from different species. Elena could see beings that looked like giant flowers, others that appeared to be made of living metal, and creatures so strange that she couldn't even guess what they might be. The ceremony began with formal greetings from each of the major species groups. Elena listened as translator devices in her ear turned their alien languages into words she could understand. They spoke about trade agreements and cultural exchanges, about the responsibilities of council membership and the benefits it would bring to humanity. When it was Elena's turn to speak, she stepped forward to the central platform and began her prepared remarks. She talked about Earth's commitment to peace, about humanity's desire to learn from other civilizations, and about the contributions they hoped to make to the galactic community. The speech went well. Several ambassadors nodded approval, and a few even made sounds that her translator indicated were expressions of welcome. Elena was beginning to relax when she noticed something that made her pause. Behind the main display showing the current council members, there was a smaller screen showing a map of local space. Most of the star systems were marked in blue or green, indicating council territories or friendly neutral zones. But one system, not far from Earth's own region, was marked in bright red. Elena tried to focus on the rest of the ceremony, but her eyes kept drifting back to that red marker. The system was labeled with symbols she couldn't read, but underneath, in smaller text, she could make out the words, Quarantine Zone Epsilon 7. After the formal ceremony ended and the representatives began to mingle in smaller groups, Elena found herself standing with Ambassador Xerxtal and several other senior council members. She decided to ask about what she had seen. Ambassador, I noticed one of the nearby systems is marked differently on your charts, Elena said carefully. A red zone. Could you tell me what that means? The conversation around them suddenly stopped. Elena noticed that several nearby ambassadors had turned to listen, and their expressions had become serious, even worried. Xerxtal's black eyes seemed to grow even darker. You speak of Epsilon 7, he said quietly. That is a difficult matter. What kind of difficult matter? Elena pressed gently. Another ambassador, this one from a species that looked like walking crystals, made a sound like breaking glass. Elena's translator converted it into words. The touched live there. We do not speak of them. The touched? Elena asked. Xerxtal glanced around at the other ambassadors, then sighed deeply. 300 years ago, there was a species called the Kethmorians. They lived in that system. They were much like your own people in some ways. Curious, emotional, eager to explore and learn. What happened to them? They became infected with something we call the weeping, Xerxtal continued, his voice growing even quieter. It changes them, makes them dangerous to be around. Any species that spends time near them begins to suffer madness, despair, eventually death. The council had no choice but to quarantine the entire system. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The entire system? What about the people living there? They are still there, the Crystal Ambassador said. We send automated supply drops when possible, but no living being can safely approach their world. It has been this way for 3 centuries. And they're just trapped there? Forever? The ambassadors exchanged uncomfortable glances. It is a tragedy, Xerxtal admitted. But there is no alternative. The weeping spreads to any species that makes contact with them. We cannot risk it spreading to the rest of the galaxy. Elena looked back at the map display, where the red zones seemed to pulse ominously. What kind of supplies do you send them? Basic necessities only. Food, medical supplies, manufacturing equipment. Everything is delivered by automated drones that are destroyed after each mission. And they've been alone like this for 300 years? Yes. And Captain Vasquez? Xerxtal's voice became firm, almost threatening. I must strongly advise that you never, under any circumstances, approach that system. Earth is new to galactic civilization. You do not understand the dangers involved. The weeping has killed entire ship crews who thought they could help. Some of the galaxy's greatest medical minds have tried to find a solution. All have failed. Elena nodded slowly, but her mind was racing. As the evening continued and she mingled with representatives from dozens of alien civilizations, she couldn't stop thinking about the red zone on the map. An entire species, trapped and alone for 3 centuries. Everyone in the galaxy had simply accepted that nothing could be done. Later that night, alone in her quarters aboard the Harmony's Edge, Elena stared out at the stars and wondered what kind of galactic community humanity was really joining. She pulled up the long-range sensor data they had gathered during their approach to the station. It took her an hour to find the information she was looking for, but there it was. The star at the center of Quarantine Zone Epsilon 7 was dying. According to the readings, it had perhaps 50 years left before it would no longer be able to support life on any nearby planets. Elena realized that the Kethmorians weren't just trapped and alone. They were slowly dying, and apparently no one in the galaxy was willing to do anything about it. Elena couldn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about the dying star and the people trapped around it. By morning, she had made a decision that would change everything. She called a meeting with her senior officers in the ship's conference room. Dr. Sarah Chen sat across from her looking curious. Chief Engineer Marcus Torres was there too, along with Security Chief David Park and Communications Officer Lieutenant Rebecca Walsh. "I want to talk to all of you about something important," Elena began, "something that might be dangerous." She told them about the quarantine zone and the Kethmorians trapped inside it. She explained about their dying star and how the galaxy had given up on them completely. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long time. "Captain," Dr. Chen said slowly, "are you suggesting we disobey direct orders from both Earth Command and the Galactic Council?" "I'm suggesting we save lives," Elena replied. "These people have been abandoned for 3 centuries. Their star is dying. If we don't do something, they'll all be dead in 50 years. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "What exactly do you think we can do? The galaxy's best scientists have tried to solve this problem. If they couldn't help, what makes you think we can?" "Maybe we can't," Elena admitted. "But maybe we can at least try to understand what's really happening there. We could study this weeping from a safe distance. Maybe we could find a way to evacuate them before their star dies." David shook his head. "Captain, with respect, this sounds like suicide. These aliens made other species go crazy just by being near them. We could lose our minds or die." "We could," Elena agreed. "But they're going to die for certain, if no one tries to help them." The debate continued for 2 hours. In the end, Elena made it clear that she was going to the quarantine zone, whether her officers supported her or not. But she wouldn't order anyone to come with her. This had to be a choice each person made freely. One by one, her officers volunteered. Dr. Chen said her medical training might be useful. Marcus said the ship needed an engineer. David said someone had to keep them all safe. Rebecca said they would need communication support. 6 hours later, the Harmony's Edge was traveling toward Quarantine Zone Epsilon 7 at maximum speed. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Elena tried to contact Earth Command to explain what she was doing, but her messages would take weeks to reach home, and weeks more for a reply to come back. She also tried to research everything the Galactic database contained about the Kethmorians and the Weeping, but there wasn't much information. Most records were marked as classified or dangerous. What she did learn was troubling. The Kethmorians had once been peaceful traders and explorers, much like humans. They had joined the Galactic Council almost 400 years ago and had been well-respected members for decades. Then something happened. The records weren't clear about what, and they became dangerous to be around. Ships that visited their system started reporting strange effects. Crew members became depressed and anxious. Some began crying uncontrollably. A few committed suicide. Eventually, no one would go near Kethmorian space at all. The species was completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The Galactic Council had tried sending medical teams and researchers, but the results were always the same. Anyone who spent time around the Kethmorians began to suffer from what they called the weeping, an overwhelming sadness that seemed to come from nowhere and grow stronger the longer someone stayed near them. As they approached the system, Elena ordered all sensors to full power. What they found surprised her. The system looked normal. One yellow star, several planets, asteroid belts, and space stations. There were signs of advanced civilization everywhere. Cities on the planets glowed with lights. Ships moved between different worlds. This wasn't a dead system. These people were still alive and active. "Captain," Rebecca called from her station. "I'm picking up communication signals from the 3rd planet. It looks like they're trying to contact us." Elena hesitated. The moment they answered, there would be no going back. The Galactic Council would know they had disobeyed orders. "Put them through," she said. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at an alien face. The being looked somewhat like a human, but taller and thinner, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. Those eyes held an expression of shock and fear. "Please," the alien said in heavily accented but understandable English, "please leave this place immediately. You do not understand the danger. We are cursed. We will harm you." Elena stepped forward. "My name is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earthship Harmony's Edge. We've come to help." The alien's eyes widened even further. "Help? No, you must go. Others have tried to help. They all suffered for it. We cannot control what we do to other minds. Please, for your own safety, leave now." "What's your name?" Elena asked gently. The alien hesitated. "I am Vinthara. I speak for the Council of Survivors on Kethmori." "Vinthara, we know about the weeping. We know your star is dying. We want to try to understand what's happening and see if there's anything we can do." "You cannot help us," Vinthara said, and Elena could hear the pain in her voice. "We have been alone for so long. 300 years of isolation. Our children grow up never seeing another species, never knowing that others exist beyond our cursed system. But this is how it must be. We are dangerous." Dr. Chen stepped into view of the camera. "I'm a doctor and scientist. Could you tell us more about how the weeping works? When did it start?" Vinthara looked surprised to see another human, especially one asking scientific questions rather than running away. "It began after the solar flare," she said slowly. "A massive eruption from our sun damaged something in our neural development. We lost the ability to shield our emotions from others. Our grief, our sadness, our despair, it radiates from us like heat from a fire. Other species feel it as if it were their own." "Your emotions affect other people?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice full of interest rather than fear. "Yes. The deeper our pain, the stronger the effect. And we have carried so much pain for so long. 3 centuries of loneliness, of knowing we can never touch another being without causing them to suffer." Elena felt something strange happening to her. As she listened to Vinthara speak, she began to feel an overwhelming sadness. It wasn't her own sadness. She could tell the difference, but it felt completely real. Her eyes began to water. Around the bridge, she could see her crew experiencing the same thing. Marcus was wiping tears from his face. Rebecca had her hand over her mouth. David looked like he was struggling not to cry. But something else was happening too. Instead of feeling afraid or wanting to run away, Elena found herself wanting to comfort this alien woman who was clearly in so much pain. The sadness was terrible, but it was also somehow beautiful. It was the sadness of a mother who had lost her children, of a people who had been abandoned by everyone they trusted. "Vinthara," Elena said, her voice thick with tears, "you're not dangerous, you're hurt. There's a difference." For the first time, Vinthara looked hopeful. You do not flee from us?" "No," Elena said firmly. "We don't flee from people who are in pain. We try to help them. But the others, all the other species, they said we were monsters. They said our curse would spread across the galaxy if we were not contained." Dr. Chen had been taking readings with her medical scanner throughout the conversation. Now she looked up with excitement in her eyes, despite the tears still flowing down her face. "Captain," she said quietly, "I think I know what's really happening here. They're not cursed. They're not dangerous. They're just broadcasting their emotions. And we're not going insane from it. We're just feeling what they feel." Elena looked around the bridge. Her crew was sad, deeply sad, but they were still functional. They were still thinking clearly. They were just experiencing someone else's pain along with their own consciousness. "Vinthara," Elena said, We'd like permission to come down to your planet. We want to meet your people and learn more about what's really happening here." "No," Vinthara said desperately. "You do not understand. In person, the effect is much stronger. You will not be able to bear it." "Let us try," Elena said. "We're humans. We're pretty good at dealing with difficult emotions." For a long moment, Vinthara stared at them through the screen. Then very quietly she said, "Very well. But please, be careful. We could not bear to harm yet another species trying to help us." The shuttle ride down to Kethmori's surface was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. As they got closer to the planet, the emotional effect grew stronger. Waves of sadness, loneliness, and despair washed over the crew. Dr. Chen had to grip her seat to keep from sobbing uncontrollably. Marcus was crying openly, though he kept flying the shuttle with steady hands. But Elena noticed something important. None of them were going insane. They weren't losing their minds or becoming violent. They were just very, very sad. The city where they landed was beautiful, but empty feeling. The buildings were tall and graceful, made from some kind of pale stone that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. Gardens and parks were everywhere, full of strange plants with silver leaves and purple flowers. But there were very few people visible on the streets, and those they did see walked slowly, their heads down. Vinthara met them at the landing platform with a small group of other Kethmorians. Up close, Elena could see that they were a beautiful people. They moved with natural grace, and their large eyes held depth and intelligence. But they also looked incredibly sad, as if they carried the weight of the entire universe on their shoulders. "Welcome to Kethmori," Vinthara said quietly, "though I still believe you should not have come." Elena stepped forward, and without thinking about it, reached out to take Vinthara's hand in her own. The alien woman gasped and tried to pull away. "No, you must not touch me directly," Vinthara said in panic. "The effect is much stronger with physical contact." But Elena held on gently. The sadness hit her like a physical blow. 3 centuries of loneliness, fear, and despair all at once. For a moment, she thought she might collapse under the weight of it. But she didn't let go. "It's okay," Elena said through her tears. "We can handle this." Vinthara stared at her in amazement. "How?" "Every other species that touched us became lost in madness. Some took their own lives rather than continue feeling what we feel." Dr. Chen approached slowly, her medical scanner humming. "May I run some tests? I think I'm beginning to understand what's happening here." As they walked through the city, Vinthara explained more about her people's situation. The Kethmorians had once been naturally empathic, able to sense and share emotions with each other and other species. It was a gift that made them excellent diplomats and healers. But the solar flare had damaged the part of their brains that allowed them to control this ability. Now, they projected their emotions constantly, without any way to stop or reduce the effect. After 3 centuries of isolation and increasing despair, those projections had become overwhelmingly negative. "We have tried everything," Vinthara said as they entered what appeared to be a medical facility. "Meditation, drugs, even surgical procedures, nothing works. The projection continues and grows stronger with each generation as our children inherit our pain." Dr. Chen was taking readings throughout their conversation. Elena noticed that several crew members who had stayed with the shuttle were also coming into the city, apparently drawn by curiosity rather than driven away by fear. "I think I have an idea about what's happening," Dr. Chen said finally. "Your people are naturally empathic. You're designed to share emotions. But for 300 years, all you've had to share is sadness and pain." "Yes," said Morden, a Kethmorian scientist who had joined their group. "But we cannot change what we feel. We are alone, abandoned, dying slowly as our star fades. How can we feel anything but despair? Elena looked around at the beautiful city, at these graceful people who had been left to suffer in isolation. Then she looked at her own crew members, who were still crying but were also functioning normally, still thinking clearly despite the emotional onslaught. "What if you weren't alone anymore?" Elena asked. Before anyone could answer, the communicators on the humans' belts began beeping urgently. Rebecca's voice came through with obvious strain. "Captain, we have a problem. A Galactic Council fleet just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 12 ships, including a battlecruiser. They're demanding we leave immediately." Elena sighed. She had known this would happen eventually. "Put them through to my communicator," she said. A new voice filled the air, deep and angry. Elena's translator identified the speaker as Admiral Thexkar of the Vorthan Empire, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. "Captain Vasquez, you have violated direct orders from the Galactic Council and placed your entire species at risk. You will remove your people from that contaminated planet immediately and submit to quarantine procedures." "Admiral," Elena replied calmly, "we're conducting important research here. These people aren't dangerous in the way everyone believes." "Research?" The Admiral's voice was filled with disbelief. "Captain, that system has been quarantined for 3 centuries. Some of the galaxy's finest scientists and doctors have studied the weeping. All have concluded that the Kethemorians pose an unacceptable threat to galactic civilization." "Then maybe the galaxy's finest scientists were wrong," Elena said. The silence that followed was long and tense. When the Admiral spoke again, his voice was cold with threat. "Captain, you have 1 hour to evacuate your people and leave that system. If you do not comply, Earth will be placed under immediate quarantine. No ships will be allowed to leave your solar system. Your species will be cut off from galactic civilization permanently." Elena felt the weight of that threat. Humanity had just joined the galaxy. To be cut off now would be devastating for Earth's future. But as she looked at Vinthara and the other Kethmorians, she couldn't bring herself to abandon them. "I need to discuss this with my crew," Elena said. 1 hour, Captain. Not a moment longer." The communication ended, leaving them standing in the medical facility with the weight of an impossible choice hanging over them. "You must go," Vinthara said immediately. "We cannot allow our curse to destroy your people's future. You have already done more than anyone has done in 3 centuries just by coming here." But Dr. Chen was studying her scanner readings with excitement. "Captain, look at this data. The emotional projection isn't constant. It's actually been decreasing since we arrived." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "When we first made contact, my readings showed massive emotional output from the Kethmorians. But over the past few hours, it's been steadily dropping. It's still strong, but it's not as overwhelming as it was." Morden looked at the scanner in amazement. "How is that possible? Our projections have only grown stronger over time." "I think," Dr. Chen said slowly, "it's because you're not completely alone anymore. You have people here who are listening to your pain without running away. You have witnesses who understand that you're suffering, not dangerous." Elena felt a spark of hope, but she also knew they were running out of time. In less than an hour, the Galactic Council fleet would take action that could destroy Earth's future. "We need to make a choice," she told her crew. "We can leave now and save humanity's place in the galaxy, or we can stay and try to help these people, but risk everything for our own species." Marcus wiped tears from his eyes and spoke first. "Captain, my daughter is back on Earth. I want her to have a future among the stars, but I can't live with myself if we abandon people who need help." One by one, the other crew members agreed they would stay. Elena activated her communicator. "Rebecca, I need you to send a message to Admiral Thexkar. Tell him we're not leaving." "Captain, are you sure about this?" "I'm sure. Also, I want you to start broadcasting everything we've learned about the Kethmorians on all frequencies. Let the galaxy see what's really happening here." As word of their defiance spread through the council fleet, Elena wondered what would happen next. They were just one small ship against the might of galactic civilization. But they weren't going to back down. Vinthera took Elena's hand again, this time not trying to pull away. The sadness was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Gratitude, hope, and the first stirring of belief that maybe, after 300 years, her people didn't have to be alone anymore. "Thank you," Vinthara whispered. "Whatever happens, thank you for staying." Elena squeezed her hand gently. "We don't abandon people who are in pain," she said. "That's not who we are." Above them, in the space around Keth Mori, 12 heavily armed ships waited for humanity's answer. Elena had given them one, but she knew the real test was just beginning. The hour passed without any action from the Council fleet, though Admiral Thexkar sent increasingly angry messages demanding the humans leave. What he hadn't expected was the response from the rest of the galaxy. Rebecca, broadcasting from orbit, had been sending detailed reports about what they were discovering on Keth Mori. The news that the humans were not going insane from exposure to the weeping spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Within 6 hours, 2 more ships had arrived at the system. The first belonged to the Miran Collective, a peaceful species known for their philosophical approach to problems. The second was from the Shailen, warrior poets who valued honor and courage above safety. Captain Tavara of the Miran ship contacted Elena directly. "Captain Vasquez, my people have been watching your broadcasts with great interest. We would like to send a small team down to observe these Kethamorians for ourselves." Elena was surprised. "Captain, I should warn you that the emotional effects are very strong. Your people might not react the same way humans do." "Perhaps not," Tavara agreed. "But we have spent 3 centuries accepting that these people must suffer in isolation. If there is even a small chance that we were wrong, don't we owe it to them to investigate?" Admiral Thexkar's voice cut into the conversation. "Captain Tavara, I order you to maintain your distance from that contaminated planet. You are putting your crew at risk." "With respect, Admiral," Tavara replied calmly. "The Miran Collective does not recognize your authority to make such orders. We will conduct our own investigation." On the planet's surface, Elena was working with Dr. Chen and the Kethmorian scientists to understand more about the weeping. They had set up a research station in the medical facility, where they could monitor the emotional projections in real time. What they found was remarkable. Not only were the projections getting weaker as the Kethmorians spent time around humans, but the humans' presence seemed to be teaching the aliens how to control their abilities again. "Look at this," Dr. Chen said, pointing to readings on her screen. "When Vinthara focuses on feeling grateful instead of sad, the projection changes completely. Instead of overwhelming despair, it becomes, well, it's hard to describe. It's like feeling warm sunlight after a cold day." Mordun was studying the data with fascination. "We had not realized this was possible. For so long, all we felt was sadness and isolation. We had forgotten that other emotions existed." Elena was working directly with a group of young Kethmorians, teaching them simple meditation techniques that Dr. Chen had suggested. The results were incredible. When the young aliens focused on positive memories, while human crew members sat with them, offering emotional support, their projections shifted dramatically. Instead of the crushing weight of despair, Elena felt waves of wonder, curiosity, and hope radiating from them. It was like watching flowers bloom after a long winter. "This is it," Dr. Chen said excitedly. "This is the key. The Kethmorians aren't broken. They just need emotional balance from other people. They're natural empaths. They were designed to share emotions with others. But when they're isolated, all they can share is their own pain." Vinthara, who had been watching the session, approached Elena with tears of joy in her eyes. Is it really possible? Can we learn to control this again? I think so, Elena said. But it's not something you can do alone. You need other people around you, people who can share positive emotions along with the negative ones. That's when the alerts started sounding. Captain Tavara and a small team from the Miran ship had landed and were approaching the medical facility. Admiral Thek's car was demanding they leave immediately, but Tavara was ignoring him completely. When the Miran team entered the facility, Elena watched their reaction carefully. The Mirans were tall, thin beings with pale green skin and large heads. They were known for their calm, logical approach to everything. The moment they walked into the room where the Kethmorians were working, the Mirans stopped in their tracks. Their large eyes went wide, and several of them began to make soft humming sounds that Elena's translator couldn't interpret. "Remarkable," Tavara said quietly. "We feel their pain, but it is manageable, like a sad piece of music rather than a crushing weight." One of her team members, a scientist named Velron, was taking readings with equipment Elena didn't recognize. "Captain, the emotional resonance is definitely present, but it's not causing the neurological damage that our medical records describe. Because they're not just broadcasting despair anymore," Dr. Chen explained. "Working with humans has helped them remember how to project other emotions too. The effect is much more balanced now." As the day continued, more remarkable things happened. A young Kethmorian named Sindal, who had never met anyone from outside his world, successfully controlled his emotional projection for nearly an hour while playing a simple game with human crew members. An elderly Kethmorian called Morthek shared a memory of his childhood before the solar flare, and everyone in the room felt waves of pure joy and wonder. But the most important breakthrough came when Vinthara asked Elena a simple question. "Your people have been very kind to us," she said. "But I must ask, what will happen when you leave? Will we go back to being alone again?" Elena looked around the research station, where humans and Kethmorians were working side by side, where the air itself felt lighter and more hopeful than it had when they arrived. "What if we didn't leave?" she said slowly. "What if some of us stayed?" The room fell quiet. Dr. Chen looked up from her equipment. "Captain, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that maybe the solution isn't to evacuate the Kethmorians," Elena said. "Maybe the solution is to bring other people here, to end the quarantine and start building bridges instead of walls." Vinthara stared at her in amazement. "You would do that? You would give up your place in the galaxy to stay with us?" "We might not have to give up anything," Elena said. "But even if we did, yes, some of us would stay." At that moment, Rebecca's voice came over the communicators with urgent news. "Captain, you need to know what's happening up here. 3 more ships just arrived. The Shaylin sent a battlecruiser, and they're demanding to speak with you. But there's something else. Captain Zethara of the Shaylin ship is asking permission to bring a combat unit down to the planet." Elena felt a chill of worry. "A combat unit? Are they planning to force us to leave?" "I don't think so, Captain. Captain Zethara says her warriors want to face the weeping themselves. She says that if humans can endure it, then Shaylin honor demands they prove they can do the same." Elena couldn't help but smile. The proud warrior poets wanted to test themselves against the emotional challenge that had defeated the galaxy for 3 centuries. Within an hour, a squad of Shaylin warriors had landed near the medical facility. They were impressive beings, tall, heavily muscled, with dark skin marked by intricate tattoos that seemed to move and shift in the light. Captain Zethara approached Elena with formal dignity. "Human Captain, my warriors and I request permission to face this weeping. We have heard that you endure it without losing your minds. We would prove that Shaylin courage is equal to human compassion." When the Shaylin entered the research facility, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The warrior poets were hit by the full emotional weight of 3 centuries of Kethmorian pain. Several of them staggered. One fell to his knees, but none of them fled. Instead, they stood their ground, tears streaming down their faces, and began to chant something in their own language. Elena's translator converted it into words about enduring pain with honor, about standing strong in the face of suffering. The Kethmorians watched in wonder as these fierce warriors chose to stay and bear witness to their pain rather than run away from it. "How many species," Vinthara asked quietly, "have simply accepted that we must suffer alone?" Elena looked around the facility, where humans, Mirans, and Shylin were all working together with the Kethmorians, all sharing the burden of emotions that had once seemed too heavy for anyone to bear. "Too many," she said, "but that's going to change." Above them, Admiral Thek's car was discovering that his authority to enforce the quarantine was being questioned by more and more species. The broadcasts from the planet were showing the galaxy something they had never seen before. Proof that the Kethmorians could be helped, that their condition could be managed, that 3 centuries of isolation might have been unnecessary. The standoff was far from over, but for the first time in 300 years, the Kethmorians were not alone. The crisis came 3 days later, just when Elena thought they were making real progress. Admiral Thek's car had grown tired of waiting. 6 more ships had joined the fleet surrounding Kethmori, but they weren't all council forces anymore. Some belonged to species who wanted to see for themselves what was happening on the planet. Others had come to support the humans' efforts. The Admiral was losing control of the situation, and Elena could tell from his increasingly angry messages that he was planning something drastic. The research in the medical facility had been going better than anyone had hoped. The combined teams of humans, Mirans, and Shylin had helped dozens of Kethmorians learn to control their emotional projections. Some could now go for hours broadcasting feelings of hope and joy instead of despair. But Elena noticed that Vinthara had been growing more quiet and withdrawn over the past day. When she asked about it, the Kethmorian leader just said she was thinking about difficult choices. The morning of the 4th day, Elena woke to find Vinthara missing from her usual place in the research facility. Mordoon found her at the top of the city's highest tower, standing alone in a ceremonial circle that had been carved into the stone floor centuries ago. "Vinthara," Elena called as she climbed the stairs to reach her friend. "What are you doing up here?" "I have been thinking about what you said," Vinthara replied without turning around. "About how we need others around us to maintain balance. About how we cannot heal in isolation." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What are you planning?" "You have been so kind to us. Your people, the Mirans, the Shylin, all of you have risked everything to prove that we can be helped, but the galaxy still sees us as dangerous. As long as we exist, there will always be those who fear us." "Vinthara, no!" Elena started running toward the circle. "I am going to prove to the galaxy that their fears are justified," Vinthara said sadly. "I am going to show them that we truly are too dangerous to be allowed to live." Before Elena could stop her, Vinthara began to sing. It wasn't a song in any language Elena recognized. It was pure emotion-given voice, 3 centuries of accumulated grief, loss, fear, and despair, all focused and amplified through Kethmorian abilities that had been suppressed for too long. The effect was devastating. Elena felt the full weight of every Kethmorian who had died alone, every child born into isolation, every moment of hopelessness that the species had endured. It was like being crushed under an ocean of sadness. But Elena didn't run. Instead, she forced herself to walk forward into the circle with Vinthara. "You don't have to do this alone," Elena said through her tears. "You cannot help me," Vinthara replied, her song growing stronger and more painful. I am going to broadcast pain so intense that it will kill anyone who tries to approach our world. I will prove that the quarantine was necessary. Your people will be forced to leave, and the galaxy will see that we truly are monsters. Elena activated her communicator. All teams, I need everyone on the tower top immediately. Emergency situation. Elena, no, Vinthara said desperately. I am trying to save you. The pain I am creating will destroy your minds. Then we'll bear it together, Elena said firmly. Within minutes, the entire research team had gathered in the ceremonial circle. Humans, Mirans, and Shylin all joined hands around Vinthara, forming a living chain of support. The emotional assault was incredible. Wave after wave of pure anguish that threatened to overwhelm their minds. But they held on. Dr. Chen gripped Elena's hand so tightly her knuckles were white, but she didn't let go. Marcus was sobbing uncontrollably, but stayed in the circle. The Miran scientists made their humming sounds, somehow harmonizing with Vinthara's painful song. The Shylin warriors chanted their poems about enduring suffering with honor. High above them, every ship in the fleet was monitoring what was happening. Admiral Thexkar watched his instruments spike with readings of emotional projection far beyond anything in their records. This was the kind of psychic assault that had driven earlier rescue attempts to madness and suicide. But the humans and their allies weren't fleeing. They weren't going insane. They were sharing the burden, making it bearable by refusing to let Vinthara carry it alone. Elena forced herself to speak through the waves of pain. Vinthara, look around you. Look at everyone who's choosing to stay. We're not here because we're forced to be. We're here because we care about you. Slowly, gradually, the tone of Vinthara's song began to change. The pure despair started to mix with something else. Gratitude for the people surrounding her. Wonder that they would choose to stay. Hope that maybe her people didn't have to be alone anymore. As the emotion shifted, the crushing weight began to lift. The pain was still there, but it was balanced now by love, by friendship, by the simple fact that these beings from other worlds had looked at her people's suffering and chosen to help rather than turn away. Captain Zeth Ara, watching from her ship, contacted her fleet commander. Admiral Thexkar, are you observing what I am observing? I see it, the admiral replied grimly. The humans and their allies are enduring a level of psychic assault that should have killed them by now. And yet they remain functional, rational, and effective, Captain Tavara added from the Moran ship. Perhaps our understanding of this situation has been incomplete. More voices joined the conversation as captains from different species began to question what they were seeing. How could the humans survive something that had defeated the galaxy's greatest minds for 3 centuries? The answer was simple, though it had taken Elena 4 days to fully understand it herself. The Kethmorians had never been dangerous. They had been suffering, and the galaxy had chosen isolation over compassion, fear over understanding. By the time Vinthara's song finally ended, the fleet above had grown to include representatives from over 30 different species. Most had come to see for themselves what the humans were doing. Some had come to offer help. Admiral Thexkar found himself outnumbered and outmaneuvered. When he demanded that the quarantine be maintained, a dozen species voted against him. When he threatened to use force, the Shylin battlecruiser positioned itself between his ship and the planet. The final decision came from an emergency session of the Galactic Council itself. Elena, still standing in the ceremonial circle with Vinthara and her team, was asked to address the full assembly via communication link. Honored representatives, Elena began, looking out over hundreds of alien faces on the main screen. For 300 years, you've maintained a quarantine based on fear. You told yourselves that the Kethmorians were dangerous, that their condition was contagious, that they had to be isolated for the good of the galaxy. She gestured to the mixed group of beings around her. But what if you were wrong? What if the real problem wasn't that they were dangerous, but that they were alone? What if the solution isn't walls and quarantine, but bridges and support? The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species argued that the quarantine was still necessary, that the risks were too great. Others pointed out that multiple species had now safely interacted with the Kethmorians without suffering the effects described in old records. In the end, the vote was close but decisive. The quarantine would be ended. In its place, the galaxy would establish what Elena suggested calling sanctuary worlds, places where species dealing with psychological or emotional challenges could receive support and treatment instead of isolation. The Kethmorians would be the first to benefit from this new approach, but Elena suspected they wouldn't be the last. How many other species across the galaxy had been abandoned because their problems seemed too difficult to solve? 6 months later, Elena stood again in the same ceremonial circle, but everything had changed. The tower top was now a garden where humans, Kethmorians, Mirans, Shaylin, and dozens of other species worked together. The city below bustled with activity as the first interspecies medical research facility in 3 centuries was built. Vinthara approached her with news from the latest council session. Earth has been formally inducted as a full member of the Galactic Council, she said with a smile that held no trace of the crushing sadness Elena had first seen. And you've been asked to head the new Department of Interspecies Psychological Support. Elena looked out over the thriving city, where beings who had once been considered too dangerous to approach were now teaching others how to heal emotional wounds that the galaxy had previously thought incurable. "You know what the best part is?" Elena said to her friend. "What?" "We're not the species with the biggest ships, or the most advanced technology, or the strongest military, but we're the species that doesn't give up on people. That's not a bad reputation to have." Vinthara took Elena's hand, and instead of crushing despair, Elena felt waves of gratitude, hope, and joy. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not giving up on us." Elena squeezed her friend's hand and looked up at the stars, where ships from across the galaxy came and went freely, bringing new people who had been told their problems were unsolvable. Each one would discover what Elena had known from the beginning. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't the ability to fight, but the courage to reach out to those everyone else has given up on. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to let someone suffer alone. And sometimes that makes all the difference in the galaxy.